Good morning, friends. I'm Pastor Karn. I'm our campus pastor here at our Blooming campus, and just like Pastor Todd shared, I am chosen, challenged, and charged, just like all of you. Amen. We're going to have our ushers come forward in just a couple minutes and receive our morning tithes and offerings. They're also going to take your connection cards from you. So if you haven't had a chance to fill that out, it's in your now that you were given when you came on in. We have several who are visiting with us for the first time this morning. Welcome. We are blessed to be able to worship with you this morning. So whether it is your first time and you want to let us know who you are and how we can, maybe add you to our mailing list or let you know via email or text that we were so blessed to worship with you, or if you've been coming here for years, maybe you've never shared your email or your phone number, or you've got change in that contact information, you've got prayer requests, fill all that out. If you did our Mark study, part of our small group in your home unit this week with a family or friend, you weren't able to make it to one of our weekly gatherings, go ahead and mark that on the back, so we can keep track and continue to celebrate how many are growing and being discipled in the Lord. We think, I say it every time I stand up here, how blessed I am to be with you. And I want you to know how much I mean that. Whether you are a formal member of POC or whether you just come here week after week, we love you. I love you. You are a valued part of the POC family. And nothing changes that. We cherish each and every one of you. That being said, I'm going to talk to you for a little bit about membership right now, because there is still a place for individuals formally becoming a member of the church. It's not because one church is better than another, or one church says, yeah, we got it all together, everybody should be coming here. Far from it. It's about an individual or a family unit saying, this is our church. This is our home. This is where God is using us to make a difference in us and in our community. And so this is the place that we will commit to being a part of the body. That's what the Bible calls us to be, not just random people out wandering around, but a body of believers. And so in the world of the church, we show that by joining together in membership, not because of metrics or numbers or all those things, but because we come together to work hand in hand, arm in arm, to walk out the mission and the vision, to commit and walk faithfully as that company of believers, with all the benefits and responsibilities that come with being a member of a group, a member of a church family in this situation. I see so many people here this morning who are delighted and proud formal members of POC. I see some who might be thinking about that. This might be the time we're ready to step into membership. I'm sure there's somebody listening online right now who wasn't able to be here this week, who's thinking, you know what, I've been thinking about becoming a member as well. And I want you to know you're all going to get your chance. Because God has been honing the mission. About the last 18 months, God has been really honing and sharpening the mission and the vision of POC. He's helped us kind of narrow in on what our specific purpose, our specific role is, not only in the faith community, but also here in Bloomington Normal and soon now in Muhammad as well, to be that everyone church that Todd talked about, right? Where everyone is chosen, challenged, and charged. And we see how God is calling us to do that in specific ways here within the walls of the church and outside the walls of the church. But we also know that to be successful at doing what God's calling us to do, we need people who are passionately committed and invested in this vision, in the POC calling, who want to be a part of the process. And membership allows us to state, kind of in the same way baptism says, yes, Jesus has saved me. Membership says, yes, Jesus has called me to help this church do what he's calling this church to do. So we are having a membership Sunday coming up April 5th. That's Palm Sunday. We're going to have a busy couple of Sundays. Membership Sunday on the 5th, Easter on the 12th, Baptism Sunday on the 19th. April is a month to be at POC, let me tell you. Lots of exciting things going on. But on the 5th, we will receive people into membership. What we hope is that we will be receiving all y'all into membership. If you are a member, our hope is that on that Sunday, you will choose to stand up here and recommit your membership at POC. Celebrate that continued desire to be a part of the POC body. If you're a regular attender, our hope is that God is leading you to take that first step and join POC as a formal member and commit that Sunday with all those renewing that this is the body of believers that you are becoming a part of, that you are joining the family in. You're going to receive an email at the beginning of this week with a lot more details about how this process is going to work. But what we hope is, what our desire is that everyone would choose membership, either as a first-time member or as a renewal. And as a part of that, go through our brand new membership class. It's about a 2.5, 3-hour seminar where we have 3 different sessions we'll be offering March 15th, 22nd, 28th. Again, more details will be in that email. But this class, led by Pastor Todd and our campus pastors, Pastor Lisa and myself, will really kind of dig into that mission and vision that God is laying at the feet of POC, in addition to our denomination, what it means to be a part of the Church of the Nazarene. For new members, this is essential. You need to know what you're becoming a part of, what you're joining. We really want everybody to come through that. But we think that for renewing members, this is important too. How many times have we signed up for something or joined something and even after a few years, certainly after maybe a few decades, lost sight of some of those things, what it means to be a part of that organization? We'd love to see everyone who will be joining us for Membership Sunday go through one of those classes, have that kind of refresher or update on what it means to be POC, what it means to be a part of the Church of the Nazarene. So you can look at those times when they come through in that email, decide which one is best for you and sign up. And then once everybody's had a chance to take that class, we'll celebrate with Membership Sunday on April 5th. We're going to make this an annual process so that every year we have that chance. We won't ask you to take the membership class every year, but we want to make this a part of our culture, that every year we have a chance to stand up as a church and say, yes, this is the body of POC. Yes, we know what POC stands for, where God is leading us, and we are renewing each and every year to lock arms and commit to walking out this vision that God has laid on our feet. So look for that email the first of the week. If you've got questions after that, by all means reply, let me know, and I'd be happy to answer any of those questions. One last quick announcement before we call the ushers forward. Friends of Pastor Mike and Karen Olenchek, they're retiring. Their reception is this coming Saturday at David Davis Mansion, Ewing Manor. The other one, it's at Ewing Manor on Saturday from 1 to 4. It's an open house, so those of you who are interested, I'm sure Mike and Karen would love to see you. If not, you can certainly send them a card or wish them greetings as they prepare to retire from Grace Church over on IAA Drive and head to Georgia. With that, would our ushers please come forward? Thank you so much, POC family, for continuing to be faithful in your gifts and your tithes and your offerings, all the ways that you support the ministry at POC. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for your continued blessings, for the ways that you lead us as families, the way you lead us as a church, Lord. Continue to lead us, continue to bless us. Bless these gifts, Lord, and bless our time in worship. In your name we pray. Amen.
Oh, man. Good morning. How is everybody today? So just a show of hands, who is Jimmy Fallon? You love roller coasters. You'd get on, you'd get in the front, you'd be, okay, all right, those are my kind of people. And who's on the other side where you're Kevin Hart and you're like, push it down further. Okay, all right. So I just had to get the temperature in the room. Yeah. And then there's the people that say, I will never get on there. Who's that hands? Yeah, we got some people like that too? Okay. So I am Pastor Zach. I'm the Family Ministries pastor here at Point of Change, and I am chosen, challenged, and charged. And we've been going through the Gospel of Mark, and I'm going to kind of lead you up to where we're at because we're about to hit a turning point in the Gospel of Mark. And so we've been following Jesus and his life with the disciples, and we see him, and he's been healing people, right? And he's been casting out demons and driving out impure spirits, and he's been teaching, and he's been preaching, and he's been feeding thousands upon thousands of people. And he's been walking on water. I don't know what that's all about, but he's walking on water, right? We saw that. We read about that. Then he's showing compassion on the crowds. So we saw him have compassion on the crowds, eating with sinners and tax collectors. And then we see his interactions and kind of conflict this in confronting the hypocrisy of the Pharisees, the teachers of the law. So we've seen all this leading up to this point. But now it's about to get real, all right? So strap in like that ride, right? Because it's about to get real, and this is where we're at, because today we're getting into the point of the Gospel of Mark where everything starts to shift. There's a turning point in what has led up to this. And so it's like an amusement park, You go in, you walk in the front gate. I've been to several amusement parks in my short life, because I'm not that old. But I've been to a lot, right? And you walk in, and you see all the rides, you see all the attractions, you see all the pretty stuff and the lights, and you hear the sounds, the screams, some of that motivates you, some of that it's like, I'm going to just go back this way, right? And walk out. You smell the food, because there's always good food. That's one of my favorite parts, is the food. What was that you talking about? Oh, yeah. And so you have that. But then at some point, you have to go from watching and taking it all in to you actually have to experience it. You have to choose that you're going to experience the amusement park. So you pick out the biggest, baddest ride, and you're like, I'm going to do that one. So you go in, you get in line. So you're already a little nervous, kind of like Jimmy and Kevin there. You get a little nervous, you get in line. And if you're like me, when you get nervous, you start talking really fast. You start talking about anything. You start talking about sports, you talk about Marvel, you can talk about superheroes. You just goes on, right? Ask my wife, that's how it happens. And she's like, you're nervous, aren't you? And I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm like, right? And so you get a little nervous, and you're in line, and then you're going through the line, and usually the big rides, the best rides, there's like long lines, so you gotta wait it out. You get up there, and the gate closes, and you can see the ride going, and you're like, okay, I am next in line. And then the nerves really start going, and there's a handlebar there, and you can just do this with it, right? If you're like me, that's me, okay? So, and then the gate opens, and you have that choice. You're like, okay, I can either sit down, buckle up, and get ready for the ride that's coming, or I can go around and go down the exit ramp and just not experience the ride. And that's where we find the disciples today. That's where we're going to read about in Mark chapter 8, verses 28 through 38. It's this turning point, and they're at that moment. And so it starts off, it says, Jesus and his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked them, who do people say I am? They replied, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others, one of the prophets. But what about you? Who do you say I am? Peter answered, you are the Messiah. And Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. And at this point, the disciples come to a pivotal conclusion. Jesus is the Messiah. He's the one. He's the Christ. He's the Son of God. He's the one that's been promised all those years in the Old Testament to come save the people of Israel. He's going to rescue us. And so why not tell people? I mean, I'm imagining they're like, okay, he just confirmed, right? And they're all talking like, he did. He said, yeah, right? He was good. And so they're like, why can't we tell people? This is a huge thing. We've been waiting for this. But you see, Jesus, he's a pretty smart guy, right? And he knew something else about the disciples. He knew that in that moment, when that was happening, that they only saw half the picture. They saw this glorious Messiah, the Son of God, the one that was going to deliver them, right? But they didn't see the suffering Messiah. They only had half the picture. And so we go on and it says, he then began to teach them that the Son of Man, which is just another word for making Jesus the Messiah, right? A reference that he referenced to himself, must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, which we've already seen that. We followed him in his interactions with the Pharisees, and that's never a good interaction most of the time. And it says, and that he must be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter. Get behind me, Satan, he said. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. And so you're like, okay, what just happened here? Because first, Jesus predicts his own death. It's the first time we see in the gospel. He predicts his own death. And so he lays that out very plainly to his disciples. But then we get Peter over here, who is one of Jesus' disciples, probably one of the ones closest to him. He's one of the closer disciples to him. And he comes at Jesus and starts to rebuke him about this. And the thing is that Peter only saw half the disciples. They only saw half the picture. Jesus laid out what's about to happen, the suffering that's coming. And Peter missed it because Peter's mindset was wrong. So Dane Ortland, the author of the study that we're going through in our small groups, yay for small groups, yes, woo! We're having a good time in small groups. We're going through the Gospel of Mark, and Dane Ortland is the author of the study we're going through, but he said it beautifully, so I'm just going to read what he said. It was not Peter personally that Jesus was rejecting as satanic. Rather, it was Peter's mindset, the worldly thinking, the thinking that rejected suffering as a viable path for the Messiah. We learn here that the insidious nature of the forces of evil, even Peter, the one of the disciples closest to Jesus, was capable of falling into the patterns of thinking that aligned with Satan rather than God. And I love that. When I read that, I was like, oh man, that's good. I got to put that in there because that sounds really good. But the thing is here we find Jesus again. He's a pretty smart guy. And he's got something to teach him about this, right? And so he goes on in the next passage, the next part of the passage, to tell us what that mindset should be. And so we read, and it says, then he called the crowd to him, along with his disciples, and said, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels. And here's the thing, is that in this moment, Jesus, he paints a picture of what the Christian mindset is. He lays it out to his disciples. What's about to happen? And you see, the thing is when he's painting this picture, he's making some connections. And so he says, take up their cross. Well, everyone in the audience knew exactly what he meant when he said, take up their cross. Because they were controlled by the Romans, and the Romans would crucify people. And so they would take the worst of the worst criminals, and they would have to pick up that cross, and they would carry it all the way to where they were going to be killed. And they'd get nailed on that cross, and that was how they killed them. That was their torture, right? And so his audience knew exactly what he meant when he said, pick up that cross. And it was the way for Rome to show that they had a power and authority over that individual who was being killed for what they had done. And the thing is that he used that analogy to connect something here. The Christian mindset is full submission and obedience to Jesus and his ways. That's what's going on right here. That's what he's telling them. The other half of that picture is the Christian mindset has to be submission and obedience to Jesus and his ways. Because when we're fully surrendered, when we give up our life, because he talks about this saving your life and giving up your life for me, and then that saves it, and it's all kind of wonky, and you're like, that's all kind of backwards and flipped upside down, right? But he knew what he was talking about, and he knew that we have to surrender our self-centeredness, our control over our life, that we have to give that up. That's what he's talking about there. We have to give that to Jesus, submit and obey to Jesus and his ways, so that then we are saved and we have life. And it's ironic or funny or I don't know, but Pastor Todd, he says this, he said it many times. He says, our want to is not required. And you're like, okay, what does that mean? Where is that? That's like a curveball. Where are we going with this? Because that didn't really line up with what we're talking about. But you see, the thing is that, our journey, our lives, there are going to be times when we don't want to do what God says. It's just going to be that way. We're not going to do what Jesus says. We don't want to do it. And there are going to be times in our life when it gets tough. Right? And there are going to be times in life when we must do difficult things that make no sense at all to us. That's just how it works. But you see, the thing is that surrender of all of our control over trying to manage our life, manage self, that mindset of self, right? The beauty of submission and obedience to Jesus and his ways, why that's our mindset, is because then we do it anyways. That want to is no longer required anymore. Because our mindset is there. and we have given that surrender. We have surrendered our life to Jesus. And submission and obedience, it just means that we give up our selfishness, we give up our self-centered mentality, our destructive ways of thinking. Man, I don't know how many times the way I thought about something, the way I viewed someone or something, or had an opinion here or an attitude there, how many times it got me in trouble. You can ask my parents. I like to argue, and I like to say, no, I'm right, and my opinion is right, and I don't care what you have to say. I know what I'm doing here. I can manage this. All the teenagers, their heads just went down like this, right? But I get it. I don't know how many times I've been there, and my destructive way of thinking led me down a path, and I get to the end, and I'm like, man, how did I get here? And then I swing around, I'm like, oh, that's how I got there. That started it. And so what it means to give up our selfish mindset means we give our life, our full self to Jesus, because that is where we find true satisfaction. We find true pleasure, we find joy, and we find life. True life. That's what Jesus is talking about here, and that's where the gospel has switched now. And Jesus lays it out for his disciples. And they're like, oh man, we gotta figure out if we're gonna get in and buckle up or if we're gonna take the exit. Because that's what he asked in that passage. And let me paint it this way. No job, no relationship, no substance, no amount of money, no amount of power, prestige, success, none of that will ever leave us fulfilled. Believe me, I know. I've chased those things. And it doesn't. There's no fulfillment at the end of that road. Because at some point, all the pleasures of the world, they're going to fail us. And they leave our souls empty. Jesus talks about it in there. You gain the whole world, but you forfeit your soul. And at some point, all of those things, they lead to a dead end. I know. I've been there. And so Jesus offers fulfillment, joy, pleasure, and life. We just have to surrender to him. We just got to give our life up, our need to control it, to him, so that we can experience true joy, fulfillment, pleasure, and life. And the thing is that's for everyone. Everyone in the room, Jesus offers life. Whether you've been a Christian for a long time, he still offers you life. He's still doing it. And whether you've never made that decision ever in your life, and you've never decided that, you know what, I'm going to follow Jesus, he offers you life. He offers all of us life, a chance at this fulfillment, this joy, this pleasure. And we just gotta take it. We just go in and we say, Jesus, I believe in you. I want to follow your ways. I want to follow you. Forgive me, walk with me, help me learn to do this. We ask for that forgiveness. He comes into our heart and does some changing, starts that changing process. And boom, like that, you're a Christian and you start on that journey to be more like Christ. And the thing is we do that, but we go back to our mindset, right? Because Peter, he was close to Jesus. Like he was walking the walk. He was doing the thing. But he missed it. He only had half the picture and he missed it. His mindset was still going the wrong way. And so I want to ask this question to everyone in the room. How is your mindset? You see, our mindset dictates our behavior. And so if you think about it, if my mind is set on being selfish and fulfilling everything that I need, then my behaviors are going to show that. When I go to a restaurant, you better believe I'm not going to tip that waitress very much because I need that money. That's for me, right? Or I'm going to be rude to that waitress because she's there to serve me. It's all about me. And that's my mindset, and that's how I do it, and that's how my behaviors go, right? And so if you see that, our mindset, the way we think, the way we see things, it dictates how we behave, and people see that. They know exactly what is going on up here because they see it in the way that you act. And so the question is, how is your mindset? How is my mindset? Because Jesus is talking about that right here. And see, the thing is that the Christian mindset is submission and obedience to Jesus and his ways, because that is how our behaviors become Jesus-like. He lays it out. That's how it happens. We become Jesus-like, Christian, like Christ, right? And so our mindset dictates how we behave and how the people see and how people see the gospel. Because you can paint it in a good picture or you can paint it in a bad picture. Because people are watching. People are watching your lives. And in that passage, he talks about giving up our life to save it. But there's another part in that passage in the end there. He says we got to give up our life to Jesus and for the gospel. And gospel means good news. It's the good news about Jesus. And the good news is meant to be shared. We don't just keep the good news to ourselves. That doesn't make any sense, right? And so he talks about giving it to Jesus, but also we're giving our life to the gospel and the spread of the gospel and the sharing of the good news, because we've been reading. Jesus has been healing people, and he's been help and hope to people, to crowds, to tax collectors and sinners. That's what we've been reading about. And then he calls his disciples here. He says, this is where you got to be. This is your mindset. This is how we're going to do it. Gives them that other half of the picture. And I was challenged by Pastor Todd's sermon a couple weeks ago. He was talking about the halftime show. And he was talking about the response to how the halftime show went. And the Christian response to how the halftime show went. And it wasn't pretty. Now, POC, we did a pretty good job, right? You guys were rock stars. But there was a lot of backlash. But the thing is that showed how their mindset was. People that were up in a big fuss about the halftime show, they were seeing those women through a mindset that was judgmental, through a mindset that was not what Jesus is, because Jesus had compassion on the crowds. He ate with tax collectors and sinners. That doesn't make any sense then. Why would I look at people who are doing a halftime show and doing it well? They did a great job, but they don't know Jesus. To what we know, they don't know Jesus. So they're acting and behaving the way that works. So we shouldn't expect them to think like Jesus and be like Jesus. And we, as Christians, our mindset should be like Jesus, submission and obedience to his ways, to what he's doing, to him. And that struck me when he was talking about that. I'm like, man, that's a bad portrayal of the gospel. That is a bad portrayal of what Jesus is. People saying that they're Christians and then doing that, because that doesn't really portray what we've read about Jesus all the way to this point. That's not what he is. And so the good news is meant to be shared to others, and our behaviors portray the gospel. So it matters how we treat people, and it matters how we act, and it matters how we talk, it matters how we worship, it matters how we pray, it matters how we love others, and it matters how we view the people in the world. Because that shows where our mindset is. And if we're living the way Jesus wants us to live, if we're following his ways and him, because he's life. And he wants to save our lives. And he offers fulfillment and pleasure and joy and all these things that we can't do on our own. But that's where we're at. And that's what this turning point in the gospel is it matters. How we do things, how we see things. Our behaviors are dictated by our mindset. And I want to talk about a story real quick. Many of you know I bought a house. And it's a house that it's kind of a fixer-upper. It's kind of like a mansion-esque manor/haunted house thing. And it's big and pink, looks like Pepto-Bismol, on the corner of Franklin Park. And, so we bought this house. And some of you probably know the story. Me and Lindsay have gotten up here. My wife, Lindsay, she's back there doing a great job being a rock star and kids. But some of you probably don't know the backstory to that. We went to a conference about a year ago, and the POC staff, and it was called Exponential, and it was about church planting and discipleship and spreading the gospel. And man, I tell you what, every single time one of the big sessions went on and a speaker got up there, God was sitting there, man, he was like right next to me. And he was whispering, telling me things in my ear, and I'm like, goodness sakes, I just can't get away from it. And it was just one thing. I'm like, oh. And he was like, Zach, your mindset's wrong. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm a family ministry pastor. I know what I'm doing. My mindset's right where I need to be. And he's like, your mindset's wrong. And so that began to kind of play in my head. And Jesus was like, God starts talking. And he says, look, you live out in the country. And it's a beautiful house, beautiful property. You know, we redid it, made it look all nice. And we had big plans and big dreams for it. And there's nothing wrong with living in the country and having that and doing that. But the thing was, is Jesus said, hey, that's not what I have for you, specifically me and my family. And it's funny because I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, man, but I want this. Like, we wanted this. We wanted a dog, Chief. We wanted cat. Well, I didn't want cats. I will put that. I did not want cats, okay? But I said, okay, we live out in the country. Cats eat mice. They won't get in my house, which didn't work anyways. But we got these cats. They just showed up at my house. My sister-in-law, my wife, went to the Humane Society, I think. And I don't even know. But went there and they come back with like 6 little kittens. 3 of them look like they're like malnourished. And I'm like, they're going to die. Like, that's going to happen. And then what are we going to do? Like, I got the kids and they're going to love them. And like, but like they just didn't look good. And I'm like, that's not good. I want to love on this thing. I'm not going to just kick it out. But I'm like, what are we going to do with 6 cats? They're going to eat the mice. But anyways, so the dog and the cats for the half the family. And then it's like, and I wanted the yard for my kids to play in. And God, I like being off the road so my kids can play and do whatever they want, pretty much, as long as I watch them a little bit, you know what I mean? Right? Because I'm off the road. There ain't nobody back there, right? Don't be judging my parenting here, all right? I saw it. I saw the room here, okay? All right? But I'm like, I want that. My kids want that. Lindsay wants that. This is where we want to be. It's a great school district. My kids are going to thrive here. They're going to get a great education. And Jesus was like, Zach, your mindset's wrong. I'm like, Jesus, no, it's not. He's like, yes, it is. And I'm like, okay, that's what I want. And he's like, it's good to want things, and I want things for you too. And I have pleasure and joy and life for you. And there's nothing wrong with all those things, but that's not what I have for you specifically and for your family. And I said, all right, well, I have a choice, I guess. I can listen, I can submit and obey, and my mindset can shift and decide that I'm going to follow Jesus and his ways to a T. Or I can say, no, I want this. So I was like, okay, God. You know, and there's Pastor Todd rolling around the head. Your 1-2's not required. Your 1-2's not required. I'm like, gosh. I'm like, okay, all right, I get it. But then I was like, God, okay, fine. We'll do this, but you got to tell my wife. Because I am not doing that. I'm not doing that. And so we get back from the trip, and here I am talking to my wife. And I just told her kind of what was in my head. God's like, hey, you need to move back to the city because there's people that need the gospel. And I have a plan for you and your family specifically. And this is what you need to do. And she looked at me, and I'm like, God, this is your chance right here. You got to help me. I told you got to talk to her, all right? Because I knew what was going on. She wanted that. We wanted all of that. And so we prayed about it, and God kept showing up. And he said, guys, your mindset is wrong. And so we said, okay. All right, we're going to submit, we're going to obey to what Jesus has and his ways, even though it makes no sense at all. I talked about that earlier. It just doesn't make any sense. And I don't want to do what God says in this moment. And it's going to be hard. And, you know, I love my house, and I designed that kitchen. Like, it was nice. But God's like, no, you got to go. And so we said, okay, we're going to move. And here's the thing, is that word move has a meaning for me and Lindsay and the kids, because when we first got married, we lived with my mom and dad because we were young, very young. We had no idea what we were doing. And so my mom and dad were gracious enough to let us live with them and fix up the whole basement for us. So we lived there, and then Madeline was on the way, so we moved into our first apartment. So we did that for a while, and then we decided we wanted to move again. So we moved to another apartment that was closer to where my parents were. And then we decided, well, we're going to buy a house, so we don't want to re-up that rent. And so we decided we're going to move back in with parents until we find a house. So we moved back in with 2 kids this time, not just 1. And, oh, by the way, Maya's on the way. So we've got a 3rd on the way. So we move in there, and again, gracious enough to take us in. And then we're like, okay, well, we can't find a house, and we can't have a 3rd baby in here because that's just going to be crazy. So now we got to get another apartment for 6 months to lease that out. So we're going to move again, move all our stuff in there, move in, do that, and then we'll find a house, right? So then we have Maya, or I didn't have Maya, Lindsay had Maya. And we go in there, and we're in that apartment for about 6 months, and then we decide we're going to buy a house. And it's going to be a house on the west side of Bloomington. It's going to be a fixer-upper, and we had no idea what we were doing, again. So we decided to buy it. But the thing is it's fixer-upper, and so we're like, hey, we'll just move in with mom and dad again with 3 kids this time. And when we move in with mom and dad with 3 kids, we'll just fix it up because there won't be anything in there. So we did that. And again, they graciously took us in, and they helped me tremendously. My in-laws helped me tremendously. Without the 4 of them, that house would have never looked the way it did. Because me and Lindsay did a little bit, and I learned a lot, but we didn't do the heavy lifting with the Oakland house. So we lived there for about a year and a half and decided we're going to move out into the country because we want all this stuff. So then we got this crazy idea. We're going to get this A-frame out in the country, and we're going to fix it up and make it look nice, and we're going to move again. And so this time, instead of living with my mom and dad, when we bought the house, we lived with her mom and dad because they were in town now in the basement with the 3 kids. So we move again, and we move in there, and we're fixing this house up. Then we get in there, and we say, we are done. We are not doing this again. We're done. And here, that's why when God started talking to me, and he's like, look, your mindset's wrong. And I was like, God, moving. That word move means something to us. And God, I don't want to uproot my kids again. They just got friends in the school, and it's a good school. And so we did what God asked of us. And so we decided to look for a house. And Lindsay sends me this picture of this big pink house. And I'm like, that is bigger than all the houses we've had, the biggest project we could ask for. And we've got a 4th kid now. Like this, it makes no sense, right? But we decided we're going to move in. We're going to go there. We're going to do this thing. And God, he worked all the way through that process. The Whistlers bought our house out in Hayworth. That worked out. We didn't have to get a realtor or nothing, and all the timing worked out. And in 9 months of being in this monstrosity of a house that we didn't think we'd be in and whatever, my kids ended up back at the same school because there was a mix-up which it wasn't just a mix-up. God did this. But he opened that door for my kids to go back to the same school, and they were treated like they were welcomed back like rock stars. And as a parent, when you see your kids welcomed in something like that and they want to go back to school and they want to do that, you're like, man, that was God. And I'm like, whew, there's some joy there, right? Joy that I didn't have when I was out there, even though I thought I had it, right? I was finding it in all this stuff that I had. But the thing is, we moved in and they were welcomed back like rock stars, and God worked all that out. And then I have a beautiful house now, still in the work in progress. It's a big house, but it's beautiful. And we have small group there. We have youth group there, Velocity. We do pregame young adult ministry there. We ran a haunted house out of that thing. We did a back-to-school bonfire out of that thing. We did a Christmas Eve little open house thing for people to come by and hang out. We did New Year's party. We've had other parties. We've had people in that house coming in. We've had people coming off the street and say, hey, I like your house. Can I come in and see it? And you're like, I don't know you, right? But that's the thing is like, man, you know how many people have come in touch with the gospel because we moved into town? And we moved to this house and we did things that didn't make any sense to us. But there has been more pleasure, more joy, more life. Because Lindsay decided that our mindset is going to be submission and obedience to Jesus and his ways. Because he gives life even when it doesn't make any sense. and all, the jobs and relationships and substances and power and prestige and all that stuff, it doesn't fulfill us, and it just leaves us empty at some point and leaves our soul empty. So the bands, they're going to come up and play. And why they come up to play, it's a beautiful song. And I want you guys to reflect on that, but I want you to reflect on my story, what I just said, because that pertains to anyone, anybody in this room, kids, teenagers, young adults, older young adults, right? That's what goes on. We have those decisions to make. Jesus shows up. The disciples came face to face with Jesus, and he was talking about this life that's surrendered to him. And there's so much joy and love and fulfillment and satisfaction and life abundantly. And so I just want to leave you, POC, my friends, church, I want to leave you with this question, and I want you to listen to God. Whatever he's saying to you, and you might be sitting there and he's telling you something and you're like me and you're like, man, God, no, I don't want to. But do it. Your want to's not required. So as they play, I want you to think about that question. How is your mindset?